Today I'm joined with Teresa Romero, President of the United Farm Workers of America. We're going to be spending some time talking about the histories of the organization and some of the work that continues today. But first, Teresa, you've heard a lot about the history of the movement, but I want to start a little bit about talking about my dad's background and how they ended up in the migrant stream. My father's families, like many families, came from Mexico, looking for a better life. They came at the turn of at the beginning of the last century, from Chihuahua, and they came into El Paso and then and they settled in Arizona. And it was in Arizona that my father's father, established a homestead. And he talked about those days there on the rancho there in Yuma as really setting a foundation for his belief about what agriculture could be and the importance of respecting people that work the land. It was later on shortly after the Depression, the family ran on hard times and they lost their homestead, like many families, and they headed to California looking for a better opportunity. And that happened in 1943. That they actually moved to California and they hit the migrant trail. My understanding is that they landed in Brawley in the Imperial Valley, and they followed the crops up, and they would go up and down the state. And when the harvest would end, they would go to the next harvest, because remember, back in those days there was no unemployment insurance, and the only way that you could survive is you had to work and you had to follow the crops. And so they traveled up and down the state, but it wasn't until probably the 43, 44 that they kind of established a semi permanent residence in Delano. It's kind of like a home base where they would go and work areas, but they'd come back to Delano. And it was there in Delano in 43, 44 that he actually first met my mom. She was working at a gas station, and he used to tease her, when we were growing up, he used to tease her and say, he would tell my mom, honey, tell Babo, that's my nickname, about how we met and how you used to give me free gas so I would talk to you. And she would get mad. That's not true. You chased me. But, they were kids growing up. They were teenagers. 1948, him and my mom married. And it was a turning point in their lives. They went to San Jose and kind of relocated in the barrio Salsipuedes, and it was there that some interesting things happened. He was working in different jobs there, but he met a priest, Father O'Donnell from the Guadalupe Mission, that my dad would accompany, and he would help the priest go out and do mass and perform religious services for farm workers in the rural areas. But it was during that time with Father O'Donnell that Father O'Donnell began to introduce him to the Catholic social teachings. He learned about rerum novarum, the right of the working man to organize and the honor of labor, and it was during those periods that he began to develop a political consciousness. But also it was during that time that, and I guess it would have been like in 1952, that a young organizer from the Community Services Organization showed up there in East San Jose, talked to Father O'Donnell and said, I'm looking for somebody to help me with this project of organizing Latinos to address their needs. And the organization's name was the Community Services Organization. And it was at that point that Father O'Donnell suggested that Fred should talk to this young man named Cesar Chavez. And so they met and they began working. And it was really shortly after that that they met that my dad began volunteering, doing voter registration drives and filling out forms and translating forms for people. A lot of the issues that we do today with the work in the movement, just helping people with their basic needs. And then I guess it would have been in late 52, maybe early 53, he was hired as a full-time organizer. And he became pretty proficient. Now, the thing is, there was a lot of things that he needed to learn. He was humble, he was shy. He talked about his first house meeting that he had working for the Community Services Organization, that he drove around the block like 4 or 5 times before gathering the strength to pull over and to go into the house to run the meeting. And that even when he went into the meeting, that he sat there and didn't really introduce himself until people asked him who he was, and then he said who he was. But every story has its beginning. But it was difficult for him at first. But I think it shows that we all have it within us to overcome those fears and doubts that we may have, and to rise to the occasion. But he, so much so that by 1959 he was hired as the National Staff Director, one of the top positions in the CSO. And he assumed that position, but he had always had this idea that one day that CSO would go and organize farm workers in the rural parts of the states. Well, he, for many years he lobbied, and I guess it was in 1962, and actually it was at a hotel there in Calexico, where the CSO met, and a motion to organize farm workers was not approved. And he took a vacation after that, and it was during that vacation in 1962, in March of 1962, that he decided that he was going to leave the CSO and go out and organize farm workers. And on his birthday, March 31st, 1962, he made the decision to give up the best paying job that he ever had, the job that gave him the financial security that he didn't have to worry about where the next meal was coming from. He talked about leafleting every farm worker community between Lamont and up to I guess a little bit outside of Lodi, I guess it was. And he was overcoming as 100 years of prior attempts to organize farm workers that hadn't fared very well, and so the work began. But in September, on September 30th of 1962, there was a founding convention in Fresno of the National Farm Workers Association, which was the predecessor, as you know, to the United Farm Workers. And it was there that the delegates gathered, and they passed, they had nothing other than this idea and this vision for the future. And they passed resolutions about, that one day there would be a union that would have benefits, and there would be overtime for workers, and there'd be housing, and there'd be radio stations, and just this really courageous vision about the future. It's while it is a labor struggle, it's more than that. It's a civil rights struggle. It's been a movement to address the needs of farm workers, to lift them out of poverty and give them their place in society. And so those are some of the interesting things that come to mind when I think about the UFW, but also the farm worker movement. When you were elected, I was thrilled because I've had the pleasure to work with you, and I've seen your strength and your leadership that you've offered working with Arturo. But also in your own right, you've established yourself, and so when you were elected to become the first woman president of our union, the third president, the first woman president of our union, but more importantly, the first Latina president of a national union in the United States, we were all pleased. We were excited, and also I got to admit, I thought about, okay, Teresa, now you have a big job, right? It's a tough job. I don't know that people understand the yes. work. I've always said that organizing farm workers is probably the toughest job in the world because of all of the different constraints. But apart from dealing with the daily work, you also have a proud legacy that you're the keeper of now. So I'm curious, how do you deal with that? How do you feel about carrying on that legacy? And it's a burden, but also there's benefits that come from it. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Paul, when I started with the union, I started in 2009. I had my own business. I honestly came to the union thinking, a couple of years, see what happens. And once I realized and I interacted with the people that we represented, of course, I knew of your father, but in the first 2 years with the union, I learned a lot more of what your father had done. And the sacrifices that he made, not only him, but you, your mom, the entire family, and the legacy that he had left. And I would, if you would have asked me at that time that I would end up being the third president of the United Farm Workers, I would have said there is no way that that's going to happen. When the time came for Arturo to retire, I still did not think that was even a possibility. But when it became a reality, all the emotions that you can imagine, I had. I was terrified just because of the legacy, of the history, of the work that your dad did, and then 25 years of Arturo's presidency and everything that they did. And I was nervous. I was hesitant. I was everything that you can think of. But when I made my mind and I said, yes, I want to do this, it was such, the feeling that I had was such an honor that, people in the union, the board considered me to follow your dad's steps and Arturo's steps. I, like you said, I'm the third union president. I'm the first Latina and immigrant that is president of a national labor union. And I've seen things that have changed. If you talk about the demographics in the fields, you see a lot more women. And I remember when we were first went to our membership and to our leadership, I would share with them how difficult it was for me, how when I came to this country, I didn't speak English. And it was how our members and farm workers in general related to my story, because they've gone through the same thing. So it was an honor, like I said, and it is then a challenge. Coming after Cesar Chavez, something that he started with everything he had and dedicated and gave his life for. Those are big shoes to fill. And I just hope and pray that at the end, I don't think I will ever fill his shoes, but people say, she made him justice with the work that she did. The challenges that we encounter today are probably very similar to what your father saw 60 years ago, or almost 60 years ago when he started the UFW. We see a lot of racism in the fields. We continue seeing a lot of abuses. Like you said, farm workers were not entitled to overtime pay. And for us to get to that, it took decades. And even when we were able to accomplish it, it had to be phased in. So the challenges that we face with the industry are still there. And one of the biggest problems I think that we have with the current labor force is that there are undocumented. As we have seen during last year, COVID made it very difficult for all of us. We always known that farm workers have been essential workers forever, but we had an administration also who demonized immigrants, but even then recognized that farm workers were essential. They faced a lot of challenges because many employers were not providing the necessary equipment to protect them, the necessary information. They were not even, when we worked with Governor Newsom to ensure that farm workers were going to have a 2-week paid sick leave if they contracted COVID or if they were exposed to it, employers were not letting workers know of their rights, and what they would do instead, they would fire them. Mm-hmm. So workers under union contract We work with the employers, and we figure out a way to protect the workers. Those who don't have union contract were left out, and we were able to step in and provided, almost 200,000 meals for farm workers, over 1 million masks for farm workers. Last year, as you remember, the fires were very bad in California. 2020 was a bad year.
Up in the north.
We were able to provide, yes, we were able to provide 500,000 N95 masks because the workers continued to work and they were not being provided that.
Right.
One of the biggest problems that I still see the farm workers have is their immigration status. Most of them, and I'm sure it happened when your dad started the union, families work in the same farm. Mm-hmm. And when workers speak up, when workers talk about, their rights or want something, they know that they're going to get fired. But unfortunately, it's not just going to be them, it's going to be their family members. Yeah. So the struggles that the farm workers had when your dad started in 1962, some of them we have been able to overcome, but some of them we're still fighting. And every time we take a step forward, there is somebody who's going to find a way to go around and ignore the law or find a loophole, and we need to start all over again. Mm-hmm. So your dad understood from everything that I have heard. I didn't have the pleasure to meet him, but he understood, like you said earlier, that they had needs outside work. And as a union and as a movement, we have continued that. And we have started under the union different organizations that can help farm workers in a different way, even if they're not, under union contract. Mm-hmm. If we're one of the work that we do when it comes to overtime, when it comes to heat illness protections, when it comes to immigration, we do it to protect all farm workers, not only those under union contract. Mm-hmm. And that is what happened with overtime. All farm workers in California now receive overtime. We're fighting to get that law at the federal level. We're working on immigration reform. We passed the heat illness protections that literally save the life of farm workers when the temperatures get so high, especially here in California. Mm-hmm. And we're working also on having that at the federal level. We have organizations that will help farm workers, and they help farm workers with immigration, like the UFW Foundation. That is, the UFW Foundation is the largest organization that provides immigration services in rural areas. And they are partnering with us on the work that we're doing on immigration. We know that we have farm workers that come from Mexico and that come from with a special visa that is called H-2A, which is temporary workers in agriculture. And unfortunately, those workers are being abused even before they get here. Right. And that's why we also created another organization that would do that kind of recruitment in a transparent way to ensure that farm workers who are going to come here and work so hard do something that most of us in this country would not do. And they are taken advantage of, like I said, before they get to this country. So I think it is the legacy that your father has left all of us continues. The work definitely continues. Your father created a movement, and the people that worked with him and they're still alive, they're still working and supporting the work that we do. I remember, hearing about the stories your dad created. The credit union, had clinics at the time to be able to provide other services to farm workers. So I think as a movement, we continue to do that because we understand that the employers still resist.
Right.
They still push back. They still don't understand and don't want to see the importance of the work that, in my opinion, these professional farm workers do day in and day out.
Right.
And, we have, like I said, it started under the union, several organizations. But I think one of the first organizations outside the clinics and outside the credit union was the National Farm Workers Service that it is under the umbrella of the Cesar Chavez Foundation. I would love to hear how that started.
That's a good question, but what I just like to add, you talked about when you were elected, how the like the fear and stuff that came over, and all I could think of is that was the same feeling that my father had when he drove around the block 4 times before he went in, right? But this thing though, a big part of his legacy is that he had tremendous faith in the ability of ordinary working people to stand up and to meet the challenges and to do things that many times people didn't think that could be done. And so I got to believe that just by you doing that work it really pays tribute to that legacy he had and the faith that he had in everyday people, working people stepping up and making a difference. So you're in good company. But
thank you for saying that, Paul. It really means a lot. Thank you.
No, it's true, right? I mean, because who would believe that the poorest of the nation's poor, right, the least educated amongst us, could take on one of the biggest and most powerful industries in this state and prevail? But it really falls back to this tremendous faith he had in people that farm workers could run their own union and they could negotiate their own contracts and they could fight to get respect. He really believed that we could do it. And so when I see you there running the organization, to me, it's that belief he had in people that's in full motion. So congratulations, okay?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. That really means a lot to me.
The National Farm Workers Service Center, which is the predecessor to the Cesar Chavez Foundation, it was formally established in it was September 15th. November 15th, 1966. It was a collaboration between Latino and Filipino farm workers. It was founded in, like I said, on November 15th, 1966. And it began its work, and throughout the years, the NFWSC, the National Farm Worker Service Center, did many things. They established health clinics, and there was daycares, and there was worker training programs, and at one time they were doing check cashing to help people cash checks and not be taken advantage of by liquor stores and supermarkets that would charge a high fee and make people buy groceries or beer and stuff in their stores, right? And so throughout the years, it's done many things. But in 19, I guess it would have been in 1990, around 1990, my father asked me if I would, I was working with the UFW at that time. I was doing some of the social marketing work that was being done, advocacy work using direct mail and media. And he asked me if I would go and work in the National Farm Worker Service Center. And so, I thought, well, did I do something wrong? Why am I getting sent there? And he basically said, no, he thought that the organization had maybe strayed a little bit and that it needed its reason for existing. He was concerned that sometimes when they didn't know where programs were developed and they didn't know where to go, that they would put it there and that it really lacked its own vision for the future. And so, he explained to me that he wanted me to go there and the charge that he gave me was, I want you to give it a reason for existing. And I remember saying, okay. And I said, okay, well, how do I know when I've done that? And he was serious. And he said, well, he says, if for some reason the organization failed to exist and people cried because you were no longer there providing the service, then you've done your job. And so
Wow.
I thought about it, and what it said was that, okay, what we have to do is we have to address the basic needs that people have. And so it was with those instructions, but also this tremendous faith that we could have, that we could go and figure it out, that we began our work. And while we're proud of the gains that we made, that there's still a lot of work that remains to be done. There's gains that have been made in California, but there's national gains that also need to be made. So what I'm wondering is, what can people do? What calls of action does the UFW have for people that are watching us today?
Paul, before I get into that, let me tell you that we've come a long ways. We have, as a movement, to me, the fact that the White House now, President Biden, is recognizing your father's legacy and your father's work by having his image in the Oval Office is the moment I saw it, I have to be honest, I cried. I thought it was important. It meant a lot to a lot of people who have been engaged in the movement, who have fought for people's rights, and the recognition is important. And I think he very well deserved. And Paul, when it comes to call to action right now, like I said, we have something that is very important to us. We have been fighting for immigration reform for decades. And we have an opportunity, a unique opportunity this year to get in a very relatively fast way legalization for farm workers, for dreamers, and for TPS, temporary protective status people. And if we put all that group together, we're talking about 4.5 to 5 million people. I know President Biden has a wonderful bill that he has unveiled. And what we're trying to do is make sure that what we're doing right now is move these 3 bills together with the Biden bill. Mm-hmm. But we can't, these 3 bills passed the last Congress with bipartisan support. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act had 34 Republicans voting for it. And some Republicans who have always voted against any immigration bill. So we know that there's a possibility right now. I don't think this is the time again to go for all or nothing, but to start moving different bills at the same time to be able to accomplish something for our communities. So what I would ask people is to call their representatives, to call their Congress, to call their senators, and make sure that the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, together with DREAM and TPS, is moved forward, making calls, letting people know how important it is to them, and how important it is that we get something soon, like we have an opportunity here, and then continue to work and fighting for the rest of the immigrants that are here in this country. The majority of them, not the majority of them, but many of them, essential workers.
Right. Sure. No, that makes sense. I remember earlier in my career, I was a union negotiator. And one of the strategies that we had is that, you negotiate a contract and and they say you get your foot in the door and you establish the organization, you establish the premise of collective bargaining, and then you get what you can, and then you go back and you get more at the next go around. And so I know that like the history of the auto workers, a big proud union, their first contract was a 1-page piece of paper that said, Ford Motor Company recognizes the United Auto Workers as the bargaining representative of workers. They didn't even talk about wages or conditions. It was just recognition. And so I understand, and the idea is that it's important that, especially after these many years of struggle and fighting for immigration reform, and these last 4 years that have been terrible in our community, that it would be good to get a victory. And I think that that we should all jump behind the union's efforts to get the Modernization Act passed, and also to ensure that dreamers and the temporary workers are also brought along. So that's what we can do. I guess I just really kind of want to end this conversation with this idea that we've talked about the work that's happened, and it's been a long time, and we sit here, Teresa, and we see that there's a lot of work to be done, right? And it's a lot that could discourage people. But if there was a lesson that I learned from my dad in working with him, is that he reminded us that our work ends, that this ends, that we lose, that we only lose when we give up fighting. And so that's really a call to get up and to go to work every day. And if there's setbacks, then you get up and you go at it some more. And the lesson that we learned from him about you only lose when you give up is really, well, for me, makes a lot of sense, especially now in the position that we find ourselves. And so I want to thank you for continuing the tradition of never giving up and always going out and fighting to improve people's lives. So thank you very much. And I want to thank everybody.
No, thank you very much.
And also I want to thank everybody else for joining us today in this conversation with Teresa Romero, President of the United Farm Workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.